Now, one other little corollary here, the fact that there's pieces missing in your vision, and the fact that when you look at something, the brain doesn't quite recognize what it is right away, triggers a very important problem with people with macular degeneration. What happens is the brain has a great memory bank, and so the visual system is engaged, and the image looks like something. They can't quite figure out what it is just by looking at it. So this memory bank starts to reach back through things that what they see might look like. And it often comes up with the wrong answer. So they may be sitting there trying to watch a baseball game, but instead they see a bowl of fruit, or they see a dead relative, or they see children gathered around the TV set. People think they're losing their mind. This is called the Charles-Bonnet syndrome, and it's often associated with macular degeneration. When you see images that aren't really there, it's not that you're losing your mind, it's that your mind is trying to compensate for the fact that your image is somewhat scrambled and it's coming up with the wrong answer or inappropriate answer. This is a very frightening problem for people with macular degeneration. Often they're afraid to tell their relatives that they see this for fear that the relatives will think their cheese has really slid off the cracker and it's time to put them in a home. So a lot of people keep this to themselves. And occasionally within a low vision exam, this will come up. And then we can tell them not to worry, it's part of the disease. The more we teach you how to compensate better, the less that's going to happen. So the images will ultimately dampen. Sometimes we work with, alert your primary care physician to the fact that you have this problem. There are some medicines that can dampen, basically cut down the overactive imagination and keep you focused on reality rather than on what your brain is trying to make out of what you see. So there's a number of ways to treat the Charles-Bonnet syndrome. We don't just have to put up with it. But doing the rehab and learning how to use your sight more efficiently on its own will tend to dampen that problem. So it's a common corollary of macular degeneration. So that's the jigsaw of macular degeneration is really sort of the way people with dry macular degeneration actually see. The other tool we found is that with the wet Macs, we often used handheld magnifiers. And a lot of our people with dry macular will come in and say, I tried magnifiers, that not only didn't help, they made it worse. And so again, the wrong power of magnification will often make a person with dry macular degeneration worse, so they abandon that. One of the things we found is sometimes, rather than any magnifier, if we just have a very bright flashlight and shine it on the print, they can read without glasses. So it's the fact that the light excites more of the cells that are involved in the dry macular degeneration problem, and vision actually improves with just lighting. So sometimes, rather than a magnifier, we prescribe a flashlight, or a special type of flashlight for people with macular degeneration. So that's part of what we do in low vision. It's not about any particular aids or a battery of aids. It's a strategy to help a person, their individual needs, how to make them see better. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was figuring out specific tasks that can't be done. So how do you do certain tasks? And there's a lot of gadgets and gizmos out there that can help. Again, but it depends on the situation. We see that, for instance, we can use telescopic glasses to make the TV better. And if we use a 2 times telescopic lens, and you've seen people that put on these special telescopic lenses for watching TV, and if we give you a 2 times lens, that actually makes the image 2 times larger. But what people don't realize is that if you sit 10 feet away from the TV, if you could just move up to 5 feet, you would get the exact same amount of magnification as putting on the glasses. And your vision, if you're at 10 feet and you move to 5, your vision actually doubles. If you move then to 2.5, it will double again. So the closer you get to what you want to see, the easier it is to see. Same with faces. People say that they can't see faces from 20 feet. Well, they can see a lot more faces from 10 feet and a lot more yet from 5 feet, and most people see almost all faces at 2.5. So halving your distance makes a huge improvement in your vision when you have macular degeneration. The same thing with reading. If you're reading at 16 inches and I give you a special glass that moves you to 8 inches, we literally doubled your vision. If I move you then to 4 inches, we double it again. So acuity improves as we move things closer, and part of the low vision workup is to move things to just the correct distance for you so that you get the optimal result. So, and many times, rather than a lot of gadgets and gizmos, if we give you just glasses that shorten up your focal length, we can achieve a number of tasks without any type of extraneous gadgets, just by changing your focal length. So our mainline therapy in low vision is to adjust your reading focus to be able to give you optimal vision. In many cases, that becomes impractical. For instance, if you're a welder and you're used to welding at 20 inches, you can't weld at 2 inches when your tools are too hot. So that's a task that won't work with moving closer. So in those situations, the next step is to use a telescopic lens that magnifies and basically set the focal length, whatever would be an appropriate working distance for welding or for any task that you can't come too close with. Now, you would think that, gee, I would much rather have a telescopic lens that lets me read at 16 inches than having to move into 8 or 4 inches. The problem with telescopic lenses is the field of view gets very small. So if I give you a strong telescopic lens and a near focus to put you at 16 inches, I may be able to make the letters big enough, but rather than reading the word animal, not only can you just see the A, you can only see the middle tongue of the A. So it's so magnified that your field of view is so limited that it's totally impractical to read with a telescope because your field's too small. So we have to find yet another strategy for those people. There are a number of magnifiers that work great, but if you want to knit, for instance, you can't hold a magnifier with one hand and you can't knit one-handed. So there are gadgets where we take the magnifier and suspend it around your neck on a chain so that the magnifier is held around your neck, and then you can use both hands under the magnifier. So there's a host of specialized magnifiers, not just a magnifying glass. We put them in stands, we put them on strings, we mount them in many ways. Sometimes we attach them to a light. So there's a number of gadgets and gizmos that we will use, but only in a very particular instance where we're trying to solve a person's problem. What works for person A with dry macular degeneration often doesn't work at all for person B. And then person C is yet something different altogether. We have a whole new world now of electronic magnifiers. Some of you have heard of something called a closed-circuit television system, where you have a TV screen, you take your newspaper, you put it under a stand, and it comes up giantly magnified on a television screen, and then you just move the paper back and forth, and the information comes through the television. Closed-circuit television has been around for a long time now. They've come down in price. But often that you're still limited. It has a very limited, you can't take a giant CCTV to the restaurant with you, put it on your table and put the menu underneath it. That's just not practical. There are some handheld versions of electronic magnifiers now, little pocket versions. But unfortunately, the screen is so small, you can only get a word or two in at a time. But for reading a menu or something that's short term, that might be a perfectly appropriate device for you. What we do today is we work with centers where they have a lot of electronic magnifiers. So once we do the rehabilitation and we set up all the other sort of more simplistic things, if the person needs help beyond that, we send them to one of these centers where they can evaluate a whole host of electronic magnifiers. It's hard to pick out of a catalog or off the internet a device that would work for you because the internet doesn't evaluate how your vision is, and so you might end up being frustrated and spending a lot of money and mailing things back and forth through internet forms, although if you know specifically what you need, often that is a good place to get a device that you've already tested. You can get maybe a better price by searching it, but now you're searching for a specific device that you've already tested and you know that's going to work for you. So that's sort of different than just Googling something in the internet and looking at a range of things and picking out a few and ordering. That's a very hit or miss way to try to get low vision devices.